All right. Hello. So my name is Lighton Phiri, and I am from the University of Zambia, which is located in the Republic of Zambia, of course. Um, so the title of my talk is Effective Ingestion of Digital Objects in Institutional Repositories using Subject Repositories. That's quite a mouthful, but that's fine. I just wanted to mention upfront that this work was actually co-authored by five research students that I have worked with in the recent past. Now, in case you are wondering, Zambia is located in the southern part of the African continent, so that's the green patch just down there. And depending on your world view, perhaps you'd argue that it's a green patch that's up there. But that's fine. So I'm currently a faculty staff at the University of Zambia, but before then, I was a graduate student at the University of Cape Town for a little over 7 years when I was pursuing my master's and my doctoral studies. I'm currently the founding member of what we're calling the Data Lab Research Group, which comprises of faculty staff and students that work in three key areas. So that's data mining, digital libraries, and technology-enhanced learning, otherwise referred to as educational technology. I do encourage you to find time and just visit our site. There's a lot of interesting research that we've been up to, and perhaps you might identify an area that you might be interested in collaborating with us. So the motivation behind this work really is quite simple. If you look at the global landscape insofar as research output or research publication is concerned, what you will notice is that there's a disproportionate representation in terms of the research output that is generated from the so-called global south, and in particular from places such as the African continent. So if you look at visualizations produced by entities such as World Mapper, you notice that the situation is really bad. This particular visualization showcases publications published between, or research output published between 2010 all the way up to 2017, it was, I believe. And so you notice that the situation is quite bad, really. There's a noticeably low research output seemingly originating from the African continent. And in fact, recent studies indicate that Africa generates less than 1% of the world research output, despite the fact that it actually accounts for roughly 12.5% of the global population. So the situation is quite bad, really. And if you dig deep into this problem and try and just do a superficial analysis of statistics that are compiled by specific academic databases, such as OATD in this case, it gives you an idea of just how bad the situation is. So the way OATD works is, this is a portal that automatically harvests metadata associated with electronic thesis and dissertations from around the world, and these statistics are actually compiled. Now, if you look at this visualization, key takeaway points here is that the block size implicitly indicates the relative contribution of theses and dissertations from that particular region or country. And the order, obviously, left to right means it also signals the relative quantity of EDDs that are produced by that particular region or country. In this case, you notice that the largest proportion is coming from Europe, obviously. A key thing here is that if you look at what's coming from Africa, you notice that we're at the end here, at the tail end. And in fact, you will notice that a huge chunk of the ETD is actually coming from South Africa, really, right? This just showcases how bad the situation is. And this, in fact, is the motivating factor behind why we conducted this study and a number of other studies that we are currently conducting and that we've conducted in the recent past. So our recent or prior research has actually given us a sneak preview of how bad the situation is in the Republic of Zambia in particular. So we set out in one of our most recent works to try and understand just how bad the online visibility of research output is in Zambia. And what we discovered really is that there's only very few higher education institutions in the Republic of Zambia that explicitly make available the research output that they produce online, right? And even the few that actually do explicitly make available this research output online have not really been consistently making available this research output. Now, this has huge implications, right? It has huge implication on things such as the ranking associated with the with these higher education institutions, essentially. And so to try and work towards this problem itself, what we have done is we've set out to take advantage of what we're calling a multifaceted approach. And so we've been working towards a number of initiatives that involve so many different things, from sensitizing our colleagues on the importance of making available this research output that is produced by their higher education institutions, and also trying to showcase exactly how we can take advantage of open access publishing platforms to make available this research output. But besides that, something we have been doing is to try and take advantage of technology, right? To try and address this problem. So for instance, we've been experimenting with a number of machine learning techniques to try and see how we can automate some of these manual processes associated with making available research output online. Right, and so the main problem that we set out to address in this particular study is centered around the many challenges that are associated with making available research output on so-called institutional repositories. Now, an institutional repository is nothing more than a technological platform that is explicitly used by a higher education institution to make available research output, right? So this could be technical reports, for instance, preprints associated with journal publications, conference proceedings, and in fact, indeed, even electronic theses and dissertations. And the idea here is you have this central location which is used to showcase your research output as an institution. Now, so the main problem associated with making available this content, really, at least this is specific to the University of Zambia, turns out to be more linked to the fact that there's a shortage of human resource that have been tasked to ingest or to deposit this research output in the institutional repository, right? And not only that, the process of ingesting the content into the institutional repository tends to be time consuming. And so as a result, what has ended up happening is a sort of situation where there's this huge backlog of scholarly research output that has not yet been ingested into the repository. And so to address this problem, we actually set out to investigate if it would be possible to take advantage of so-called subject institutional repositories in order to address the problem, right? So the idea behind a subject repository here is that rather than having an institution-wide repository, you can set up clusters or satellite repositories that may be specific to a particular discipline. And then the subject repositories would be used to synchronize content to the institutional-wide repository. And in essence, what we did was we set out to try and understand the extent of the problem we're trying to address, and then to determine whether it would be feasible to implement a subject repositories. And of course, to ascertain the perceived usability associated with the subject repository. In essence, we see our main contribution as being associated with the experimental results originating from the studies, usability studies conducted, our demonstration that it is indeed possible for us to use or to take advantage of subject repositories to attempt to address this problem. So we set out to conduct this study using a mixed methods approach, which involved content analysis, interview sessions, and of course, implementation and subsequent evaluation of the subject repository itself. In terms of the content analysis, what we did was we extracted metadata associated with content currently ingested into the UNZA institutional repository. And we did this using the OAI PMH protocol, essentially, and then did an in-depth analysis of the metadata itself by focusing on specific metadata elements. We also conducted interview sessions with staff in the library that are responsible for ingesting digital objects into the repository. And the idea here was to understand the workflow that they go through when ingesting content. We set up, we implemented a subject institution repository using an open source platform called DSpace, and then obviously configured it so that it was specific to the particular domain we were implementing the subject repository for, essentially. In terms of synchronization with the institution-wide repository, we took advantage of the OI PMH protocol and the OI ORE protocols to actually ensure that there was seamless synchronization of content in the subject repository into the institution repository. So the idea is when you ingest content into your subject repository, you can synchronize it with the institution-wide repository, seeing as people would use this as a basis to gain a sense of the research output that is generated by your institution. So the major outcomes of the study here is in terms of the content analysis, what we discovered was that there's really very little content associated with research done by faculty staff. The large proportion of the research actually is generated by, is associated with electronic thesis and dissertations, as can be seen from this tree map as well. And this is especially worrying for us because the representation of content seemingly produced by faculty staff does not reflect the total number of faculty staff employed by the institution, right? So there's a disproportionate representation of online content in the repository and the total number of faculty staff. And then in terms of the ingestion pattern here, we see that there's really a number of irregularities associated with when content is ingested into the repository. And this makes sense because there's a lean staff complement that is responsible for ingesting content into the repository, ideally. And also, as a result, you tend to have, we've noticed that there's a backlog of legacy content that hasn't yet been uploaded in the repository. So we set up the repository and we evaluated its relative usability by using a system usability scale. And what we discovered really is that overall, on average, the overall score is tied to an acceptable SAS score really. And if you try and link this to SAS adjective ratings, what you'll notice really is that overall the perception is that the usability of the subject repository was good. Right? In terms of what we actually did in this study, a reminder here that we set out to conduct a case study that was aimed at assessing the feasibility of using subject institution repositories for facilitating effective ingestion of digital content into institutional repositories. And to do this, we conducted an empirical analysis of digital objects in the University of Zambia IR to try and demonstrate the extent of the problem. We also implemented a subject repository that is meant to decentralize the end-to-end process of ingesting content into an institution-wide repository. And we did this to demonstrate that it's actually feasible to set up subject repositories. Now the obvious benefits of this are they're quite simple really, right? This idea of using subject repositories as a potential of complementing other seemingly potentially viable options of addressing this challenge, such as self-archiving. And so what we're trying to say here is that subject repositories have a potential to complement self-archiving in order to ensure that there's effective ingestion of digital content into the repository. And ultimately, the goal really is to ensure that that higher education institutions are in a better position to make available content online. So this is some of the some literature related to the study itself, most of which have been authored or co-authored by myself. My contact details in the event that you need to reach out to me. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a very fruitful interaction on this very important topic. Good day.